Welcome to episode number 281, The Road to Emmaus. It's been a couple weeks again since I last recorded an episode. I've been through one of those rough spots that, again, seem to come around all too often for those of us who have been called to work through mental illness. I really thought by this time in my life I would be more free from such difficulties, or at the minimum a reduced sentence, and that perhaps I would have learned all the lessons that can be taught from such a trial. As of yet, I still seem to be afflicted in troubling and difficult ways. With my autoimmune disease as an intertwined and complicating factor, I seem always to be in a limited condition. Over the last several years, I feel like the man on the side of the road who was passed by the priest and the Levite and waiting for a kind Samaritan that never really seems to appear. Autoimmune disease and mental illness always has a perception problem. Unlike the man on the road who had been beaten and stripped of his valuables, I have no marks to show my battle scars. Outwardly, I look as capable as any man with a gray beard and a slowing body. But inside, it's a very different manner. If one could actually look inside my body, the soul, I'm afraid that I would look far worse than the man saved by the Samaritan. And for me, it is hard to admit that I have a very limited capacity. Call it my upbringing, call it pioneer stock, call it what you will, but my mind has not yet caught up with the fact that I'm very limited in my abilities and capabilities. And it isn't just my physical abilities. My emotional capacities seem to be as limited as my physical ones. I fear someone asking me to do anything right now in my life, as my mind wants to say yes, but my emotions and my body are screaming, go ahead. Give it a shot and see what happens. The scriptures don't talk much about limited capacity, or what to do when you find yourself so deeply burdened in physical and emotional weakness. Yes, they say to plead to the Savior for relief, and I do, and I have no doubt that He provides, but it rarely is provided in the manner and quantity that I had desired. Just last weekend I had a couple of those suicide days. Not that I would commit suicide. I'm not there. The thoughts come much easier some days than others, and I seem to have very little control as to when those days come. I admit that I understand many of the purposes of my trials, at least spiritually and logically, but those purposes don't seem to temper the storms of emotions. I have had someone ask me the other day, what do you do when those days come? I sincerely wished I had an easy button response, but I didn't, and that's because it doesn't exist. If one existed, they would have found it long ago. That is not to discourage those who are still looking, but to provide reality and context for the illness. Mental illness is not likely to be cured, and that is an important statement. Can it be tempered? Yes. Can it be moderated? Certainly. Can it be managed? Of course. But with increased stress on the body, spirit, and mind, the ensuing darkness always seems to return, almost as if it were waiting in the background for just the right moment to interrupt one's life. Now, I've been afflicted almost 40 to 45 years. I've tried about everything one can do to lift the burden of the illness. I have found peace in the chaos, but also disabling doubt. It will be true for almost everyone who suffers. Doubt will always be a companion to mental illness, and not just doubt about God or the religion we so love. Doubt comes in many forms, including relationships, doubt in our emotions, doubt in our thoughts, even doubt in what is real and what is not. I don't think that my doubt will ever really subside until I pass through that portal of death. Then perchance my soul will be able to heal the hole and the darkness that always seems to be present. I don't mean to be depressing and downcast today. That's not really my intent. So often I talk about healing and the power of the Lord to lift our burdens, but I don't talk much about carrying them. And we do carry them. I carry them regularly, and I think that is important to understand that even those of us who advocate for the Lord and His mercy often carry difficult and heavy burdens. We don't let others see into us for fear that we will be rejected for those burdens. And so we often carry them alone, and with the Lord wondering why they are so heavy and difficult to bear if we're wearing the Lord's yoke. Now, I suppose that we should think that the Lord's yoke will always be light in the sense of the Scripture discussing it. Light is a comparative term. What I see as light might be heavy to others. My burdens are light only compared to what would be carrying out without the Lord's yoke upon me. When we think of light burdens, we often stretch that descriptive adjective to the extreme. We think light burdens should be easy to carry and cause us very little difficulty. But that's really contrary to the Lord's statements about the pathway we are required to follow. The Lord speaks of chastising those who follow him. He talks about pruning and sorting out the wheat from the tares. He speaks of all these things that will turn out for your good. That doesn't sound like a comfortable road to me. As I have applied the principle of narrowing the gap between the Lord and I, and coming closer to him, I have found the road increasingly uphill and fraught with all types of difficulty. The burden has been anything but light, at least in my definition of light. The more I try, the more difficult it seems to be. I think that for most of us, it is counterintuitive that once we have joined the army of the Lord, that we are required to pass through a difficult boot camp of training. And this is just not a short period of training, but a lifetime of training. It seems the more of ourselves that we give to him, the more he places us in uncomfortable situations. I know that if we give ourselves over to the Lord, he can do miracles. I just never understood that miracles come as we are placed in difficult circumstances where, rather than simply desiring a miracle, we need one. It is almost as if we are moved from one difficult circumstance to another, troubling encounter, without even a reprieve. I admit that I feel very much as if we have little to no control over our circumstances, and even our mind and spirit. I often feel that I have little time to rest or catch my breath before the next wave of issues and concerns fall at my feet. Because of my illness, I often feel as though I have nowhere or no one to turn to for help. I am perceived as the strong one, the spiritual one, the one who knows the Lord. And yet so often I feel lost in a midst of trouble and turmoil, barely able to function and perform what limited things I can do. I worry that I'm simply not enough for my family, my friends, and my colleagues. I worry that my body and my spirit will fail again at the worst possible moment. And yet I have seen so many wonderful miracles in my life. I suppose that sometimes I feel like Alma, wanting to do so much more, such as sound like a trump of an angel, but like Alma, I probably should be just content with what the Lord has given me and continues to give me. Now, I find contentment difficult. I am rarely content with my capacities and abilities. I am consistently asking for more from the Lord, and certainly I assume and I have felt that he gives what I need, but not always what I want. I want to be able to do more than simply go to work and provide for my family. And yet, I suppose that I should be content with that ability, as there are those who do not possess it. And perhaps that is a miracle in and of itself, given my medical and illness history. I think that we all want to be like the sons of Helaman and go forth in battle, receiving wounds, but not death, capable of accomplishing great feats of strength and honor. I suppose that I am not content with my 5 talents, or even sometimes my 1 talent. I desire to have the 10, and to give another 10. But that just hasn't been my path. I've been given limited capacity, and only the 5 talents once in a while, and most of the time, just 1 talent. But the Lord didn't seem to be concerned about the number of talents when he gave the parable, only what we did with them. It is almost as if very few ever get 10 talents. Most of us will need to be content with 5 or even 1, and sometimes less than that. Contentment is difficult when others around you seem to have a few more talents and capacities at their disposal. I suppose that contentment is driving comparison for one's mind and accepting that talents and abilities we were given. Even then, when we have driven comparison to others from our minds, we still struggle with internal comparison problems. I expect to lose capacity as I age. I expect that aches and pains will increase. But I still, even after 40 years of mental illness, struggle with my lack of emotional fortitude and physical abilities. My mind's always thinking that I can do far more than I really can. That battle of perception and reality is my greatest struggle. Don't get me wrong, I think we all struggle with it, even those who don't suffer illness. But mental illness makes it all the more difficult to manage when you don't exactly know when anxiety or depression will interrupt your life. Life becomes more of a day-to-day, hour-to-hour management, And the mind simply does not work in that manner. The mind expects that our emotional status and our physical status will be as it always has been. And for some reason, it doesn't take into account that you have had many serious episodes. And so when mental illness comes, the body resists and is surprised by its appearance. And then the mental fight ensues as to how to rid the body of the invading emotional force. The body searches for answers that don't often exist and wears itself out trying to fix the problem. What has been helpful and continues to be helpful to me is to recognize the illness when it comes, call it out, and acknowledge that it exists. Sometimes the acknowledgement is all that is needed to help calm the storm a little. It doesn't necessarily take away all the pain and suffering, but it gives that suffering a reason to exist, and that helps the mind. I have also found more recently over the last several years that daily bread is incredibly important to the management of the illness. I take medications and I manage my stress level. Attempt to exercise as much as I can with the autoimmune issues. I do those things that would help to moderate the illness. I certainly pray about my illness in general and more specifically, but I have found that being more specific on a daily basis as to my needs seems to provide more of the things I need in my life. I can't just pray once and ask the Lord to give me strength to do what I need to do, and that prayer works for the rest of my life. It seems that I daily need to address each specific issue and ask for the help I need with that issue. The Lord is in the details, and I have found that He wants details, and so my prayers have moved from more general terms to more specific ones. I've also found that building oneself upon the rock does not stop the hail, the rain, or the floods. But it certainly helps one not to be drowned in the high waters or sink in the wet sand. The further we move away from the Lord, the greater the emptiness we find, and the more time we spend filling it with things that do not quench our emotional desire. Yes, the church and its precepts can be daunting if you really think about all you should be doing all the time. And that can create anxiety, although I don't think it really should. The Lord isn't asking us to do all those things right now, but as we are able to do them. Sometimes when all you have is one talent, then you work with what you have, and the Lord is not disappointed but grateful that with such limited capacity you are still willing to do what He asks. Even if it is what He asks is small and insignificant in our sight. The truth is, you can face the rain, wind, and hail and floods with or without the Lord, but nonetheless you will face those perils. Better to be upon the rock of the Lord than in the sands of despair when the winds start to blow. We are going to face trials, and the trials we need in this life, and we can do it with the Lord or without Him. Sure, you might survive a few storms without Him, turning rather to selfishness and pride, but in the end, without the Lord, you will not survive the trials assigned to you before this earth. We don't get to choose the talents or the timing. We only get to choose how to apply those talents. Now, it is my hope and the hope of this podcast that in your trials and suffering, as deep as they may be, that you find the Lord there waiting for you. That He may not come as you expect, and you might be on your own road to Emmaus, and you aren't yet prepared to see Him. But as the trial nears its end and the evening comes, He will be there, and you will see Him as He is, and you will know that He has always walked with you. Until then, may you do your part so that the Lord can do His.